Welcome to True Wellness with Dr. D, the podcast where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. D, and each week I'll bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode. This is Dr. Danielle Zanzarov, PhD, and I am thrilled to have you joining us today and our special guest. Today, I am joined by Heather Simonson, who is an amazing dear friend of mine, but also a licensed clinical social worker, a certified sexuality educator, and sex therapist. And she was voted Long Island's best sex therapist. Heather's education and her experience in both counseling and health education, combined with her knowledge of integrative therapeutic techniques, really enable her to employ that truly holistic perspective of healing. And she draws from both Eastern and Western practices in her powerful work, and with her clients, providing individual attention, couples therapy, family counseling to people of all ages and abilities. You guys, what I love most importantly about Heather and what we're going to talk about today is her thorough understanding, awareness, and facility when it comes to the body's energetic systems and the body's energy centers. So welcome this afternoon, Heather. I'm super excited to have you join us. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Danielle, thank you so much for having me. It's really, truly an honor and such a gift to get to do this with you.
Yes. And what we didn't say is Heather Simonson here. She does own Sea Change Wellness Center, which is a wellness center that is in Lindenhurst on Long Island. So you guys can all check out her website and give her a visit. So Heather joined us. She's joined a couple of our retreats that we host with South Bay Wellness. And it always becomes a topic of discussion, the body's energy centers, or what are called chakras. And, some people might find the chakra thing a little woo-woo, but the truth is, Heather, and you can confirm this, energy centers are ancient, traditional medicine understanding, right? So there are centuries old understanding of the energy centers, how they impact our body, and the power that they have over our health, our well-being, our mood, our emotional states. And so that's why it's such an important topic of conversation for us to begin to consider as we think about our wellness from that very holistic perspective. Right. So give us some understanding of these energy centers, or chakras as they are more commonly called.
Yeah, thank you. So we have the physical body, right? We're all familiar with that.
Yes.
And then we also have an energetic body. And that's not something that, is really taught to us in school or growing up, or really much of anywhere, right? Unless we go to school for yoga or do something intentional studying like you have. And so it's not something that everyone really is aware of or connected with. And so, but chakras or energy centers, there's hundreds of them all over the body, but there are 7 main ones that run along the central meridian of the body, right? It's not an organ. It doesn't show up on a scan or anything like that. And chakra translates into circle or a wheel. So if you wanted to have like a visual of what a chakra might look like, if you can kind of imagine like a wheel of light, if you will, right? Kind of spinning on an axis, almost like those old school globes we used to have in elementary school, right? Yes. And they actually are supposed to spin. I don't know what the speed is, but they are supposed to spin at a certain type of speed. And when there is an excess of energy or there's a deficiency in the energy, in a particular area of the body, then things go out of balance. And that is when many of the things that you had mentioned before, right? Like then it manifests in different ways in our bodies and in our lives. It affects us physically. It affects us, like you said, emotionally. It has ripple effects in our lives, in our social lives, and how we show up with work. So it really trickles out into the world, but it's not something that we typically associate with any emotional or physical things that are happening for us.
Yeah. And that's why this is such an important conversation, because I always, Heather, in the work that I do with my clients, I really like to think outside of the box. We're kind of stuck in this box of the conventional paradigm. And yet there's all of these other things that are important for us to pay attention to when it comes to our body, our body's energetic systems, when it comes to, because you're a therapist, all of the anxiety and depression and all of these things that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I often look to, okay, where are the systems out of balance? Where is the body out of balance? Where is the energy out of balance? Because I believe that as we bring things back into balance, then we stabilize ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, all the way around. So that's why this topic is so important. And you remember from the retreat, the ladies were like, we need to talk about this because it's so pivotal, and we're not paying attention to it.
We're not paying attention to it. And I also think that a lot of the ways in which it's presented, I think is sometimes inaccessible for people. Like it gets, a lot of the text or the things that are out there become very heady, right? Or even people will say new age or woo-woo or what have you, right? And so I think that we need to really also simplify it.
Yes.
A bit and make it like applicable to our lives and have it kind of relate to people. And so it can be more accessible, even just the basic information.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do that. Let's make it accessible. Let's make it understandable. And let's make sure that when people leave or they complete listening to today's podcast, that they have a crystal clear idea on what are these energetic systems within the body that people call chakras, and why is it beyond new age, right? How do we actually bring this down to have it really, really make sense for people? So let's talk about that. So what are these energetic systems of the body, right? So you mentioned that there are several different energetic systems of the body. So where are those systems? What do those different systems represent? Let's dive into them.
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, there are 7 main chakras that run along the central meridian of the body,
which is the center line of the body, right, you guys? So I know you're all listening on the podcast, so you can't necessarily see us, but imagine like there's a string that goes straight down the center of your head, all the way down, comes out your pelvic region and goes down to the floor. So right along that line right there would be those energy centers.
That's right. We would say from the crown to the tail, right? To the tailbone of the spine, right? So we can use the spine as a guide, but the spine is in the back body and our chakras aren't quite there. It's like Danielle explained, it's along the central line of the body. And so they do start, right? So again, there are 7 main ones. The first one is located at the very base of our spine, our tailbone, which connects with our perineum, right? That's where it's located. That's the root chakra. The sacral chakra is right below the navel and exactly where it sounds like it would be, the sacrum, right? So if you can even place your hand on your lower back, you find that flat part of the spine, right? Again, it's not located there exactly, but if you imagine this wheel kind of centrally located in your pelvic bowl between your sacrum and that space right below your navel. So that's where your sacral chakra is. Your third chakra is your solar plexus, right? So that's right around where your stomach, like actual stomach is. And your fourth chakra is the heart chakra, so that your whole heart space, your wings behind you. The fifth chakra is the throat. The sixth chakra is the third eye, and the seventh chakra is the crown of the head.
Okay. So the sixth chakra being kind of like right by the center of our two eyebrows there on our forehead, and then the crown being right at the tippy top center of our head, what we call in Chinese medicine, GV20.
Okay, yes.
Those of you who are familiar.
It's actually where a baby's soft spot is, right? So like as we develop, obviously, right, it's not soft. Our skull, I don't know exactly what it does, right? But our skull hardens over that spot. So that's actually where it is, right? So it's not in the back of the head, it's not the forehead, but it's right where our soft spot used to be.
Yeah, I love that.
Makes so much sense, right? Like when we're born, like everything is completely open, right? And so babies are just that connected, right? Because our crown chakra has to do with our connectivity, right, to something greater than ourselves, to to nature, to each other. Some people might say even to a god or a higher power. So it's really beautiful that when babies are born, that space is completely open and connected.
Yes, I love that. So let's dive into each of these centers and talk about kind of what is it that they are, with all the centuries, I think it's decades before, but I meant centuries, with all of these centuries of background and history and knowledge and experience, what are they all the different chakras connected to? Right. So I guess starting with that first chakra, starting with our root chakra, that base there.
So our root chakra, well, let me just preface it all by saying each chakra is associated with different emotions that we experience as humans, different colors, which are in conjunction with the colors of the rainbow. So the root chakra starts with red, and the crown chakra ends with violet.
Right.
Viv, right? So it goes in that order. There are 7 colors. Each of them also have a tonation, like A, B, C, D, E, what have you. They each have an element that is associated with them. So there's a lot of different facets and layers to the chakra. They each have crystals that are associated with them. So it's really fascinating, the deeper that you dive into all of it. So the root chakra is they're all of vital importance, right? But I think that without the root chakra being in health and in balance, I don't know how everything else can really be in health and in balance, right? Yeah. The root chakra has everything to do with our sense of safety and security, our core basic needs in life being met. Do we have a sense of safety in our bodies, in our world, in our lives, in our families?
Yes.
So even again, beyond just like, are we clothed? Do we have food and water? Do we have shelter? Which is a part of this chakra, right? So when someone loses their job, or someone is moving, or someone is displaced, or any of those things, that chakra can wind up kiltering out of balance because they're uprooted, right? They're literally uprooted, and they may not feel, right? And of course, it's from person to person. Someone could lose their job in their home and they feel like completely secure out in the earth, So it's not to say that those things will necessarily make that happen, that it will go out of balance, but that's just an example. And so it has to do with our sense of rootedness and groundedness. So the element of the root chakra is earth, which makes so much sense.
Right.
We work on the lower body to strengthen that, or to bring that space into balance. And we do a lot of grounding exercises and tonations as well. That helps us get into that space.
I love that. I know when a lot of times when we do some meditations or things like that we're leading, we always talk about really getting grounded, being present, honing in to that root chakra. There are some meditations that I have for our clients in our practice where it even begins with, imagine that you're sitting down next to this tree. And as you sit down, you're literally rooting down into the earth, of that visualization of just grounding and centering that root chakra itself straight into the earth. So makes a lot of sense.
That's beautiful, Danielle. I love that.
Yeah. Steal it, please.
I may. So moving up the energy body, the second chakra is the sacral chakra. This is where our sex center is, right? So not just about sex, but our sexual and reproductive health. So every facet of what that is. And I could go on and do 50 podcasts about just that, of how many facets there are just of our sexual health, right? And a lot of people just associate it with just one thing, right? We all know what that is.
We might have to do another podcast on that, because that's certainly a topic that is of interest, I know, to our audience and to most people out there.
I completely agree. And it's been coming up a lot, actually. And I have a private practice and I work with a lot of individual clients. And it's been coming up a lot lately of women very oftentimes saying, if I never had sex again, I would be okay. I don't need it. And that means to me that there is something that is out of balance there. And we oftentimes don't associate many of the other health problems, physical, emotional, relational, associated with the health of that particular energy center, just like kind of turning that off. Like if we're not being sexual, or we're not connected to that energy, I should say, it doesn't have to translate into being sex, then we just don't see how the ripple effect of not being connected to that very integral, natural, normal, healthy part of us, of how that translates into many other types of issues that we have in our body, in our life, which is the same thing really for every chakra. But again, I think sex is something that oftentimes gets put on the back burner for a lot of people, and is like, I don't need that. I can live without it. You can, but it is going to have a ripple effect. And so the color of the sacral chakra is orange. The element of the sacral chakra is water. So if you think about fluidity, if you think about babies, when we're carrying them in utero, they're living in water. When you think about even just like our own body fluids, right? Which isn't always a topic that people like to think about, but like it's necessary. It's part of our health. And so it is something that we need to think about for ourselves. And so it's a really, doing a lot of physical hip openers is a way to be able to access that energy a little bit more and increase your connection there and help to bring that particular chakra back into balance.
Love that. When you say, so just for the audience here, when you say physical hip openers, what are some of those? We didn't even mention, Heather, how you are a yoga teacher and certified yoga, and I know you lead prenatal certifications and all of that aspects of things. But since it's very appropriate, given your expertise, what are some of those hip opening exercises that can balance this area?
Yum. Hip openers is like my favorite thing to do. So just some simple lunges is really good. Even sitting in like a low lunge, you can have blocks underneath your hands and kind of letting your knee fall open and hugging it back in towards your shoulder. Those are really great. Warrior poses are wonderful hip openers. If you're looking for something more down on the ground, doing things like a seated, what is called Baddha Konasana, which is where you press the soles of your feet together and let your knees fall apart. In kids yoga, we often call it butterfly, just to kind of give you that visual. That's another great hip opener. Pigeon pose is probably my favorite yoga pose of all time. And it did not start that way. It was actually my nemesis. And Many people have a very difficult time in that pose. And so that's why it's really important to support your body in using blocks and bolsters, blankets, and whatever it is that you need so that you can really truly release the musculature in that space. We do a lot of holding and a lot of gripping in there, and particularly for women.
Yes.
We hold a lot of emotion inside the sacral chakra, inside that pelvic bowl.
Yes.
A lot of pain, a lot of hurt, even things that we wouldn't necessarily attribute to like, oh, this has to do with my sexuality, but we just do. And so we need to be able to release these things from our bodies in a physical way, not just with the movements, but with particularly really, and probably more importantly, through our breath, right? Because our breath is traveling through that central line. It's moving through the energy system. And our breath is also really derived from our diaphragm, which is located in that pelvic bowl.
Yeah.
So, doing what we call pranayama practice or breathing practice and really learning how to do that on purpose, because we're always doing it, right?
Yes.
Everybody's always doing it.
Yes.
What keeps us alive, but it's doing it with intention. It's doing it with being in the present. It's doing it with mindfulness. And so learning how to direct that energy into that space can also just internally help to relax the muscles, bring things into balance. Another favorite is lizard pose, which is where you're in a low lunge and you place your hands to the inside of your foot, and you can start to work on bringing your body, your chest, your heart down to the ground. So the deeper that you go, the more open that your hips get. So those are just some, really great, easy ways. If you're looking for something to do like at work or in an office or something like that, It's really simple to just cross your foot over your knee and just bend over, right? You want to keep that spine in alignment, reaching that tailbone up, reaching your crown up, keeping the natural curvature of the spine, and just fold over. You want to keep that foot, both feet flexed. So that way you can just do that. You can do twists in that and, while you're at work. So a lot of times people say, we don't have time to do yoga. We don't have time to meditate. Well, I like to help people find ways to incorporate it into their daily lives already so that it doesn't feel like they always have to look for a big chunk of time
Yes.
that they need to dedicate in their day. Even though that's of great value, it's also good to be able to incorporate some of these things into your daily life.
Absolutely. I love those. So doing these kind of hip openers helps to then impact that chakral area of the body or that energy center.
Yes, that's correct. There are different yoga poses that we can do to focus on every single chakra.
Beautiful. Good. Okay. Let's move right on up.
So the third chakra is our solar plexus, right? So, and that has to do with our sense of power and control. It also is the center of our self-esteem, our self-worth.
Yes.
And our confidence. Okay. So that's where that all of that kind of comes from. The elements of the solar plexus is fire, which kind of, if you think about, I don't think I even need to share what kinds of exercises would be good to work on strengthening that space.
Yes.
Right. And so a lot of them are core exercises, planks and sit-ups and all those things, right? And of course, those are like fire heated types of exercises that we do. What I will say is that sometimes I mentioned earlier about how a chakra can be out of balance either by having an excess of energy or a deficiency in the energy.
Yeah.
That sometimes people who are like super into, Pilates or I don't know how to say it, it's super focused on core strength. Sometimes there may be that excess of energy, and instead of strengthening it, they may need to learn how to actually relax it or let go. In fact, I remember a story that my prenatal yoga teacher had shared about her journey that when she got pregnant, she was working for a yoga center in Manhattan, and her teacher had said to her, you better stop doing those handstands and those shoulder stands and all those things. It's not good for your baby. It's not good for your birth, right? Like she's like, no, I'm going to be strong. This is going to be great. And then she wound up, I don't remember if she needed to get a C-section or it was just a very prolonged labor and had a lot of difficulty because her musculature was so strong, it wouldn't relax and be able to release the baby. And so, having a strong core is really important. People have different values of, maybe they want a 6-pack or whatever it is. It's just something to keep in mind that you can have that strength, but you also need to have that softness. Same thing with the pelvic floor. A lot of people have pelvic floor dysfunction and all sorts of issues, even with fertility and all of that stuff. And oftentimes that is related, I'm not saying it's caused by, but it's related to even the health of the pelvic floor, right? There's an imbalance if it's too tight, right? Yeah. Hypertenacity. And there's an imbalance if it's not toned enough, hypotenacity. So the same thing just applies to every chakra, and just some examples of what you can think about in terms of your physical body and how it could be relating to the energetic body in that way. So that's the third chakra.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to say about that before I
I love this. And the third chakra too, talking about fire, we see, in my practice, I see a lot of digestive issues, right? It's so key. And the other piece is a lot of those digestive issues occur because there's not enough fire going on. That digestive fire is kind of brought itself down. Or then you have people who have, hyper issues with that quote unquote fire, right? So it's an interesting, really powerful place that you think about your digestion and your power and your self-esteem and your emotional well-being. Because let's go back, from a physiological standpoint, your digestion, right? And your stomach, that is very well connected to your emotions as well. So interesting little connection there.
Very much. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of people having digestive issues, that there's, what did you say? That there's like a deficient, it's too slow. They don't have enough fire.
Yeah.
I always think about it in terms of, right, because you changed my life with my digestion. So I'll just say that has literally changed my life of, 30 something years of living in pain and not understanding why, going to doctor after doctor after doctor, and then not having an answer until this doctor. So
thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. So yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So moving up the body is the yummy, delicious green heart chakra, right? So, I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory with what it has to do with, but to expand upon that, it's all about love. It's also about empathy. It's about compassion. It's about forgiveness. It's about so much more than that. But all of those things stem out of love, right? And so that's our love, our heart center. And doing things like shoulder openers and yoga could be really wonderful. Again, pranayama or breath work that's focused on bringing the breath not so further deep down into the belly or the diaphragm, but into the chest, into the heart to allow expansion for that space. So, when someone has gotten their heart broken or they had a loss, right? And a loss doesn't have to mean death. It could mean a job. It could mean a marriage. It could mean so many different things, right? It could mean, feeling certain ways about things that happen in the world. Like whatever that is, loss is relative and very real. And there's a grieving process that we go through with all of those things.
Yes.
And all of that is right here.
Yes.
Big, beautiful heart of ours.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So moving up the body still, and then we have the throat chakra. That is the color blue. And it has everything to do with our ability to be expressive, right? Not expressive necessarily through art, although I'm sure there's some link. I did forget to say that the sacral center, also the second chakra, is all to do with our creativity. So our creative energy is also the same as our sexual energy. And if you really think about it, right? I mean, not that our sexual energy has to be to reproduce, but to reproduce, we need to use our sexual energy. And so that is of creation. And so, but we don't have to always be creating life to have that creative side of us being fulfilled. And so just to kind of add that component to it, because I think it's so important. But with our throat chakra, it's really having to do with like our ability to speak, our ability to be expressive with what we feel, or our thoughts or opinions. A lot of times, things will go out of balance. I'll give you an example. I had a friend who years ago, she had herpes, and there was a sore that kept coming out on her lip, and she couldn't understand why. And she went to a healer, and they talked about her resistance and having a baby. And if you think about it, when you have a herpes sore, it's kind of your way of putting up a wall, right? Because you're not going to be kissed, you're not going to be intimate and whatever. And as soon as she came to that realization, she didn't have any more outbreaks. It went away.
Amazing, right?
True story.
Amazing. Yep.
True story, right? So, so that's, in terms of her ability to be also expressive about what she wanted, there was some conflict there. And so it manifested here, throat chakra, our mouths. So that's just one example of, how that kind of thing can manifest in a physical form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we see the prevalence of even thyroid issues, from that physiological side. Again, people not speaking what their truth is, or, pretending that they're okay when they're not really okay, or not asking for help when they really need help. Like, these are all things we see so often.
Yes. Or even what our needs are, right? So many times we have an issue of just being, just yesterday I was with someone and they're like, how am I supposed to say that this is what I need? Like, people are even afraid or don't even know. And we had to role play how, like, what are the words? What's the language? How are you going to present this? People are so comfortable in asking for what they need.
Yes. Yeah. So that's important for everyone to think about, like, where are you holding back? Because that has where you're holding back in terms of your communication, in terms of what you need, or your what it is that you need to say, being able to make the communications that are important for you, that has a physiological impact. So paying attention to that is really important.
Yeah, agree. So the sixth chakra, as Danielle had said, is right here in the center of our forehead. Danielle, you probably know, maybe you know, there's like this, right? I could think about the linea alba as like the central line, right, on our abdomen, right? Yes. What is it with our skull? Like, what is it like that's right here?
Well, the point that we use the point that we use here, just above a little bit above the eyebrows, kind of right between them, is a pituitary point. And if we think about the power of that pituitary, in terms of our health, that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
So if we start to go inside, right? We start to go inside the brain in the area. I know you guys can't see because you're listening to the podcast, but in the area, imagine from the front of your forehead to the back of the ridge, the back of your head, right in the center of your brain, there is where you'll also find the pineal gland. So we're talking lots of things happening with the brain there. Some even believing that the pineal gland is almost like an antenna, right? It's an antenna.
Yes. And in Reiki, when we kind of turn that on, one of the things that we need to do is to press the tip of our tongue on the roof of our mouth to access the pineal gland, and to give us access to that Reiki healing universal energy. So, which is a tool that we use to bring the chakras into balance. balance.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And, I know these things are still a little bit, I would say, in the woo woo, in the new agey realm. But the truth is, there is more and more science that's actually coming to fruition that is supporting the understanding of the energy centers, supporting of the pineal gland, supporting of that our connection with that universal consciousness. I mean, I just think about the amazing scientific research and studies that people like Dr. Joe Dispenza are doing, where they're looking at these connections with all of these things and thinking about just even intention and thinking about the work of Masaru Emoto and his research on water crystals, and how just the intention, just the thought in the presence of those water crystals of happiness or joy or sadness or anger, how that can just change the water crystals that are outside of our body. So we're thinking about how really we're so connected in so many different ways within all of these different things that are happening energetically.
We are, and that is really the essence of the crown chakra, is our sense of connectedness, right?
Yes.
Again, to something greater than ourselves, to how our energy affects other people's energy, or affects water crystals, or affects it's a ripple effect that goes out there, right? It doesn't need to be a religious or even a God-based. For me, I feel most spiritual when I'm in nature, particularly the ocean, even floating in the water. And so like that to me is the ultimate. I may as well be in church or synagogue or what have you. And so it is for a lot of people that's where they feel the most connected or the most spiritual. It's also is a sense of a connection to a religion or to a God or to a higher power. I think that really, again, the true essence of it is just our ability to feel connected. And when you even look back at models of what it comprises of a healthy self-esteem, connectedness is one of those things, right? Connected to other people, connection to faith, connection to a higher power. And a lot of the research and data shows that that's why a lot of kids or people will join gangs, because they lack that connection and they're looking for that false sense of family even. And so, again, we don't work on this a whole lot outside of religion, I feel like, and so I think there does need to be a distinction that we make for people who don't necessarily feel that type of connection, of how else can you cultivate being connected, even if it isn't with people. How do you feel connected when you're alone, right? And being alone doesn't always mean lonely, but even more so when you're feeling lonely. What are other things that you can do to feel connected if it isn't even to humans? But it is an integral part of who we are and our own self-esteem.
I love this. This is such great conversation. So let's talk about, one of the things that we're really committed to is making sure that people have really practical things that they can implement, that they can do to, facilitate their own wellness. And thinking about the energy centers, thinking about the chakra centers, I guess let's talk about, what are some ways that they become out of balance? And then what are some ways that we can bring them back into balance? I know we've talked about some different exercises and stuff, physical exercises as we're going through, but I know you see this every day. I see this every day. And I think it's important for people to start to be aware of, I'll say sometimes I'll actually check in with myself and I'll be like, I'm out of balance. Something's out of balance. And I kind of got to search, literally almost do a scan from head to toe through my body to figure out, okay, where is that out of balance coming from? And, is it something somebody said to me? Is it something I said? Is it something I forgot to do? Is it some circumstance I feel uncomfortable with that I haven't really allowed to come to my consciousness? But what what are your words of wisdom from your vast expertise here in this area?
A lot of things can bring a chakra out of balance. I mean, I think the first and foremost thing is trauma.
Yes.
Right. And for time's sake, I'll just kind of leave that there. Right. So like that, trauma is probably one of the biggest things, and that brings things out of balance. And if it's not as far as trauma, but emotional hurt or suffering or pain, oftentimes will bring those things out of balance.
Yes.
And so, for example, again, as a sex therapist, I work with a lot of sexual abuse survivors. And so a lot of times people come in later in life. I can't even tell you honestly how many times, more particularly with men, that are coming for all sorts of things, right? So all sorts of sexual dysfunction, other kinds of, hypersexuality, issues in their marriage. That's what they're coming for. And then very nonchalantly, they'll disclose, because they don't even recognize that it was sexual abuse. They'll disclose something that happened to them, most oftentimes when they were a kid. And again, like I remember one client who struggled with hypersexuality to the degree that his partner couldn't keep up. He had something like 8 or 9 kids. And she couldn't keep up even just with his sex drive. And so he was coming to try to help moderate that, and told me about when, his group of friends thought he was like this great, cool, macho guy for having a relationship with his teacher.
Oh.
And he, not until he came to my office did he even identify that as abuse. And here he is coming to therapy, trying to figure out what's going on with him. Most people say, what's wrong with me? I need to be fixed. Nobody's broken, and that's in quotations, right? No one's broken, so there's no fixing that needs to happen, but it is being able to reestablish health, right? Because we're all born in balance.
Yes.
Essentially, right? I mean, there could be things that happen in pregnancy that also bring those things out of balance, and that have us enter the world with some things that might already exist there, but essentially we are. And so, he didn't even recognize it. He was coming to figure out why. And this was why. And so a lot of what we did was mindfulness based. So I, because of the yoga and mindfulness backgrounds, I do offer that as a tool, especially because of the accessibility of it, right? Yes. Our breath, our ability to be mindful, even if it feels like we can't, or to meditate, is accessible to us at any given moment, every single minute of the day.
Yes.
It doesn't cost us anything. We don't need anybody else to do it. We don't have to go someplace else. We could do it pretty much anytime, anywhere, in different forms, right?
Sure.
And so this was a really big thing that we worked with, and then had to do a lot of reframing of when you have these feelings, what do you do with them instead of this, right? There's also a lot of breaking down cultural norms in terms of when I feel a certain arousal, let's say, this is what I have to go do with that. I have to go have sex. I have to go whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's not always does not need to happen, right? But we take that as this. So it's reframing that and giving them, different behaviors and actions and things that they can do instead. So that's just one example. I'm not sure if that quite answers your question. I hope.
Yeah. So I heard a couple different things, right? So I think, what I've heard is the actionable things are, so number one, physical movement, actually moving the body, especially opening the different energy centers or not hyper stimulating certain energy centers is very powerful.
Yes.
I heard that, just bringing that mindfulness and awareness, kind of like what I said in my example. Like what I do is I kind of close my eyes and I kind of do like a head to toe scan in my body and check in okay, where are you out of balance? What's happening? So I'm hearing that kind of level of mindfulness and connecting with your body to understand where you're out of balance. And then I heard breathing as another big tool to actually start to balance the different energy centers in the body, as well as just meditation, right? As well as meditation. And then the last thing that I heard you say, another really important piece here, is just the ability to start to maybe recognize where you've got, I'm going to call them imbalanced rather than like dysfunctional, but imbalanced patterns. So notice the imbalanced patterns in our thoughts, in our behaviors, and then start to look at, okay, well, where might that of imbalance come from? And then reframing our maybe our self-talk, maybe our specific actions or habits when those different things get triggered. So I don't know if that kind of sums up all the different things that you spoke about.
Excellent listening.
That's an important part too, right?
It is an important part. Yeah. And even just to slightly expand upon that last part, like I think that also that this reassociating certain impulses or sensations even, or urges or whatever, or thoughts or feelings in the body with something else, with something positive, right? So it's like, oh, I have the urge to, I see a Snickers bar, which is not mine would be Reese's, right? I see Reese's, I see, or ice cream, right? I see that and I'm like, oh, I really want that. Or even if I don't see it and I think like that's really what I want, right? One of the things that I've been working really hard on, and I don't keep that stuff in my house anymore, thanks to my good friend Danielle. But instead I get Lily's sugar-free chocolate. Or instead, I eat some grapes, which I know is high in sugar, but that's like, it's a replacement, right? Or I go for some fruit or something like that, right? So it's reassociating, right? Like I have this impulse, right? And connecting, like making new connections with the synapses in our brain and associations with new, more positive, healthy things.
Yes. I love that. And Heather, I am so thankful for having you be here and join us today for this episode. What is one sentence that you can leave our audience with that will have them remember the lessons, the insights, the practical tips and tricks from today's episode? What's that one sentence that you want to leave them with?
That's a tough question. That's not the sentence. I am perfect exactly as I am.
That's beautiful.
That really answers your question. But
it does.
I really think that's, even with all of our imperfections, even with all of these imbalances, even with all of this stored pain and suffering and trauma and all the healing that we have to do in the world, even with all of that, there's perfection in that. And so I think we need to be able to tell ourselves that more often, that no matter where I'm at, no matter what I'm still working on, that I really am perfect exactly as I am, which doesn't mean that we're perfect. It just means as I am, we are.
Yeah, I love that. Beautiful. And that is an amazing mantra. So all of our listeners, take that with you, take that into your day, take that into your week. Heather, again, thank you so much for joining us here today. And I look forward to having everybody join us again for our next episode drop, which will be on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you. This is Dr. D, reminding you to tune into your body, reconnect with what matters, and embrace the journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you next Thursday for the next episode drop.